CEO was just here a few weeks ago, I believe. Marion Wright Eldman.
Yes.
All right.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Commission. Thank you for allowing me to be here and speak today. My name is Shakia Cherry Donaldson, and I'm a community organizing specialist working with the Children's Defense Fund here in Nashville, Tennessee. The office was commissioned January of 2013 to come to Nashville and use this location because of its great history and its great peoples here as an incubator for challenging the Cradle to Prison pipeline. The Cradle to Prison pipeline is a systematic trajectory that young people, primarily of color and primarily who live in poverty, are put on very early on due to lack of early education, food security, housing security, violence and trauma, poor education or inequitable education, and overall just kind of violence and prison being in an intergenerational process. So after we were commissioned and brought here by my fearless supervisor, Janet Wolf, which many of you know, along with Eric Brown, Damian Durr, and Ndume Latushani, a gentleman who spent 28 years in Tennessee's Department of Correction, 20 of them on death row for a crime he didn't commit. We looked at ways in which that we could kind of challenge this system, challenge this trajectory that so many young people are placed on unbeknownst to them, just because they are born the wrong color or in the wrong economic bracket. So before I go kind of into the work that we've been doing over the past year, I want to talk about a young man, Emmanuel. And Emmanuel is a mentee of the teams. We kind of asked him for one thing and then couldn't get rid of him. But he's a wonderful young man who is a rising junior at Pearl Cone High School. So we've known him since his freshman year. And when we were asking for him to help us, communicate with young people after learning about this Cradle to Prison pipeline, he said, I want to tell you my story. And we're like, oh, okay, tell us your story. And I mean, this is a well-mannered, respectful young man. And he said, I want to tell you my experience with the pipeline. I'm like, okay. And so he went on to tell us that in second grade, after being identified as a gifted youth and given a full scholarship to a private school here in Nashville, in the second grade, he was accused of playing in an inappropriate manner with his classmate, a young white girl, and was immediately expelled for the rest of the school year, thus leaving him back for an entire school year and having him repeat second grade again. And so from that, and from him leaving this prestigious school and going back to a public school that was under-resourced and that didn't have the teachers or the curriculum to meet his level of brightness, he began to act up. So first he was put out because he was problematic because of some sexual innuendo as a second grader, and then he's put into a public school system that isn't equipped to handle him, and so he is labeled as a problem child. And he goes in and out of school, in and out of school, out of suspensions and expulsions for the next few years. By the time he reaches middle school, he's 2 full year grades behind. It was up to a remarkable teacher by his own testament that buckled down on him and gave him guidance so that he could catch up and eventually go to high school on time. And so we met him last year, as I said, at the end of his freshman year, already having 33 references for the year, or referrals, I apologize. And a referral, if you don't know, is basically a school write-up. So you don't come to school with proper dress code, or you don't obey the teacher when she says sit down, or put your head up, you can't put your head down on a book, or you're caught in the hallway going to the bathroom without a bathroom pass. These are referrals. Referrals are written on your behalf. Too many referrals leads to an automatic in-school suspension. If you don't comply with this in-school suspension for some reason, it leads to an out-of-school suspension. And so back to getting to the Cradle to the Prison pipeline, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about Emmanuel's story because I read the statistics and I read the facts and figures, but to put a face on it, to humanize the issue and realize how this severely damages a young man who has no idea of his potential yet. He hasn't even reached his prime yet. And already he's been shunned by the school system and possibly by the judicial system if he's ever caught up in a case. So, back to the Cradle to Prison pipeline and this school push out based on zero tolerance policies. So zero tolerance policies are federal policies that were enacted under the Clinton administration in 1994. They modeled DEA drug trafficking policies, and this was due to a fear that students were being used as drug mules for drug cartels to transfer drugs through schools from one individual to another. So immediately it was zero tolerance for all drugs, drug paraphernalia on school. There was also a rise in use of drugs on school premises. So they said, okay, well, we have to get rid of this. So zero tolerance, one strike and you're out. If you're caught with drugs or drug paraphernalia, you're expelled for the year. Okay, then with a rise in school shootings, the Clinton administration turned around and said, okay, well, we have to make our schools safer. So now anyone caught with a weapon of any kind on school premises, one strike and you're out, zero tolerance. Then then in addition to forcing states to mandate to these zero tolerance policies, there was billions of dollars given to states, dispersed through the states, so that police can now enter schools. So in the state of Tennessee, or National Davidson County, they're called SROs, school resource officers. I'm from New York, they're called school safety officers, but they operate the same thing. They're an extension of the police department that are assigned to schools. They can give students summonses or tickets that they then have to appear in court, or they also can arrest students on the spot if they feel they have done a criminal act in school. So what we have now done through the Clinton administration's fear and propaganda of these horrible schools and these horrible students that we have to get rid of so that we can deter bad behavior and make schools safer for those kids who want to learn, is we've criminalized bad behavior and criminalized young people for things that used to be handled in a principal's office. They are now being marched out in handcuffs and taken to jailhouses. So, so that's the federal policy, which all states have now, within the 90s, complied with. Then on a state level, Tennessee's zero tolerance policy includes guns or weapons, drugs, and assaulting any school personnel. So for instance, if two students get into a fight and a teacher goes to break it up without waiting for a school resource officer or help to come in, and they are flung in the face by a stray arm, well, if the teacher says they were assaulted, not only will the student be expelled immediately, not necessarily for the fight, but for hitting the teacher in the process of breaking up the fight, but they are also then criminally charged with assault and taken to court, or they have to appear in court. And so we looked at these trajectories for young people and how school is especially a high school education, is the best predictor of how to gain leverage for your family and yourself out of poverty. And said, well, if schools are not a welcoming place for young people and young people cannot learn and go to school and feel like they are not being policed, then something has to be done about this. So last year, we mounted a campaign with local organizations for Family Supper Series. And Family Supper Series is a community listening project. And we focused on 3 things: parent involvement or engagement, academic proficiency, because as we know, Tennessee is struggling a little bit in terms of our test scores and where our students land on a national scale, as well as students' role in academic achievement and how they interface with school. And so we found from speaking to young people and parents that they found schools to be a hostile environment. The second they walked in, they were only invited there if there was a problem. Parents only show up if there's a problem. After getting several calls, then they show up and automatically they're put on the defense to defend their child. Whether their child misbehaved or not, it is the school, they feel as if the school is attacking them. And then we also heard from educators and people working inside the building as support staff. And it's basically like, this is the school manual, this is what we have to follow, we have to, conduct law and order. But the idea that we treat children like baby inmates or like inmates to be, we already have set them up with the mentality and the mindset that they are against the system, that school is not a welcoming place, and that this is just the first step with bars on the wall, on the windows, and uniforms, and police patrol in the hallway of what it could be like in prison. Also, we looked at the social emotional effects of young people, and we found that and this is based on a CASEL report, that so many young people are, I believe the percentage exactly was 72% of young people have suffered through some sort of trauma. And this can be from something as simple as, or not simple, but as less complex as your parents getting divorced and the kind of emotional trauma that sets on you, or you listening to gunshots every night outside of your window. But anyway, without this kind of trauma being discussed or dealt with, they're in a constant shell shock manner. And so they go to school, and things that can be just as annoying as your classmate flicking a pencil or slamming the desk can trigger something in them due to this trauma and cause them to act out. But instead of asking what the root cause of such trauma is or such behavior is automatic punishment. And just to highlight the way that it's law and ordered state-based, Davidson County spends about $8,600 per pupil per school year for public school. And the average rate for a juvenile detendee in the state of Tennessee in a state-run facility is $68,000. So, in terms of in terms of resource allocation and the way that we care for young people, and the way that we care for the young people and the way that we treat young people, especially in terms of school push-out, is really important because it sets up future problems such as inmate voting restoration and knowing your rights, and parents being able to advocate for their young people, and a safety issue, because the fact is if kids have a place to go during the day and they feel excited about school and excited about learning, the less likely they are to be out causing mischief or doing criminal acts. And these are our kids. These are the community's kids. As a non-parent myself, I spend an inordinate amount of time in schools listening to children and listening to parents, and really listening to what their concerns are and what could be done in terms of suggestions about mending that bridge between academia and community. And so, as an organization, we came up with some suggestions that I want to read. And so for individuals, we say mentor a child or volunteer at an after-school program for the youth. Because the more positive role models they have in their life, the less likely they are to want to disappoint you. And for families, establish and maintain a supportive home learning environment. So that means that when school is out at 2:30 or 3:30, depending on your child's age, that the learning has to continue at home or in community. We can't depend solely on Metro Nashville public school systems to educate our children. Talk and actively listen to children within your extended family. They have just as much right and just as much say in the way they are treated than their parents do or their families do. So please listen to them. Communities, institute a cradle role within your faith-based institution or community, linking every child to a permanent caring family member or adult mentor who can keep them on track and get them back on track if and when they stray. So it's really like a community, it takes a community, or it takes a village to raise a child model. Organizations, create and distribute a calendar of free family-friendly community events. A lot of issues parents pose when they talk to me is lack of resources. They don't know where things are, they don't know how to access them, they don't know who to call. Start a parent education program for families about conflict resolution in the home and how to advocate for their child. So through Children's Defense Fund, Metro Nashville Public Schools, and National PTA, we've started this parent advocacy training, Urban Family Engagement Network, which is a 12-hour training, and it basically teaches parents their rights as it relates to the education of their child. And there's a training happening May 22nd. It's open to anyone, whether you're a parent or not. And basically, if you're trained, you can go out and give the training to groups of families for how to engage with the school system and local politics. And finally, government agencies, or partnering with government agencies. Bring other elected officials and leaders together to gain firsthand awareness of the status of your local children. Demonstrate what is working and what is not. So it's important on a local level that we all take part in it, but it's also important that we engage our elected officials of how to care and nurture for our young people. Thank you.
Just a quick question. Do you have access did you get into the school?
Basically, it was about relationship building. So first we approached principals or support staff in the school and asked to come to after school programs, or if we can come in and do project-based learning activities. And then I cultivated a really good relationship with Jeannie Cooper Walker in Metro Nashville Public Schools. So I'm invited to different events and things like that to hear a lot in that case, Metro Nashville Public Schools frustrations, because for a lot of them, their biggest gripe is we're just following the rules. Like, we know every day it's unfair and we do the best we can, but this is what's on the books. Yeah.
Question. Have you followed the two lawsuits in, I think it's Bellflower, California, and Meridian, Mississippi, about this very issue? The school systems have been sued. I don't know about what agency. And if there were any findings in those cases, have you been able to apply them?
I don't know about those specific cases, but since the Department of Ed's report came out, I want to say early March, highlighting disparities, 3 times more black students get suspended and expelled than white students. I mean, that's on a national scale. Like, they distributed this report nationally. So there's been several lawsuits. I know New York City, just because that's where I'm based from originally, is facing several lawsuits because they were labeled the worst, the most segregated school system in the country. So there are several lawsuits, but no, I don't know about the 2 you're speaking of specifically. Thank you.
Thank you.